On the chilly evening of November 20th, 2001, in a peaceful Oklahoma City neighborhood, the usual quiet was suddenly broken by the sound of gunshots. Robert Andrew, a loving father and respected Baptist pastor, had just arrived home to pick up his children for Thanksgiving. As he parked by the garage, a woman met him with a strange request. She asked for his help moving a piece of furniture. Completely unaware of the danger, Robert agreed. As he lifted the heavy item, his hands occupied and his mind elsewhere, someone stepped out from the shadows. Robert Andrew was born in Enid, Oklahoma. Robert had two older brothers, Bill and Tim, and 8 years after his birth, the family welcomed their youngest member, Tom. Raised in a home grounded in honesty, hard work, and strong Christian values, Robert's parents provided a comfortable and loving environment for their children. Robert's childhood was peaceful, marked by playful antics with his brothers and regular visits to church. During his time in high school, Robert met a young woman named Brenda. This seemingly ordinary encounter would go on to change their lives completely, though they were unaware of it at the time. Brenda, born on December 16, 1963, was raised in a Christian household in a small town in Oklahoma. Brenda was known for her quiet, cheerful, and studious nature, quickly capturing Robert's heart. Their relationship blossomed into a beautiful romance, and after graduating from high school in 1980, Robert pursued a degree in advertising with a specialization in marketing at Oklahoma State University. Brenda, on the other hand, remained the same calm and sensible young woman who, despite working at a local bank, avoided social gatherings, smoking, or drinking. In 1984, as Robert neared the completion of his degree and deeply in love, he formally proposed to Brenda, adhering to the Christian values cherished by both families. The couple married on June 2, 1984, and their future seemed bright. However, shortly after their honeymoon, Brenda confided in her mother-in-law about her doubts regarding the decision, which might have been made too hastily. As time went on, Robert focused on his rising career, while Brenda worked at a bank. The couple seemed to live in harmony. 4 years later, Robert secured a promising job at the well-known local advertising and communications agency. During their free time, the couple enjoyed attending church and deepening their faith. Around this time, Brenda became close friends with a colleague whose husband, Rick, worked as a petroleum engineer in Oklahoma City. The friendship extended to both couples, leading to frequent dinners and gatherings at each other's homes. On December 23, 1990, Robert and Brenda welcomed their first child, Tricity. By then, the family lived in a spacious home in a respectable neighborhood. 4 years later, their second child, Parker, was born. Brenda then became a full-time mother, which marked a significant change for her, as her days were now spent at home while Robert excelled at his job and eventually became the senior vice president of the company. He managed the telecommunications accounts and was known for his deep expertise and dedication, earning the affection of both clients and colleagues. Additionally, Robert was a sought-after public speaker, and received numerous national industry awards. Outside of work, Robert's greatest concern and joy were his children. Yet, beneath the surface of their seemingly normal suburban life, some secrets were hidden. Over the years, Brenda began having various affairs. Although she initially kept these indiscretions well hidden, the growing rift between her and Robert became evident to those close to them. Robert was more affectionate towards Brenda than she was towards him. It was one of those relationships where they stayed together for the sake of the children. One incident that demonstrated Brenda's capacity for betrayal occurred in late October 1997. At that time, Rick, the engineer and husband of Brenda's friend from her bank days, filed for divorce. Despite the close relationship between the two couples, Rick and Brenda quickly embarked on an affair that lasted for 6 months. Next on Brenda's list was James Higgins, a shopkeeper from Oklahoma City. During their secret encounters, Brenda confided in him that she wished her husband would die so she could obtain his money and move on with her life. As their marriage continued to deteriorate, Robert and Brenda sought counseling from the pastors at the small Baptist church on the outskirts of town. Through this close contact with their faith, Robert eventually became a pastor at the church. His kindness, smile, and positive attitude quickly earned him the respect and admiration of the congregation, who saw him as a breath of fresh air for the community. Among these people was someone who would later play a crucial role in the story of Robert and Brenda's marriage. His name was James Pavitt. James was nearing his 40s when he married his second wife. At the time, James worked as a life insurance agent. His past held some intriguing details, such as his former career as a police officer in the Air Force. This included a stint at an Air Force base in South Korea in the late 1980s or early 1990s, during which he met the woman, who later became his second wife. Several witnesses claimed that James told them he had a secret job involving the elimination of targets. Despite these mysterious aspects of his past, James was an active member of the church, and by chance, he and Brenda began teaching together in Sunday school. This connection also led to a friendship between James and Robert. James, charming and eloquent, was considered fortunate in his marriage, as his wife trusted him completely. She remained as in love with him as on the first day, despite the years they had spent together. However, even this stability couldn't stop him from starting an affair with Brenda. Cunning and discreet, the two managed to keep their relationship a well-guarded secret. Over time, as they shared intimate conversations and flirtations, they discovered they had more in common than just their capacity for infidelity and deceit. Their true interests were much darker, and to their surprise and growing bond, they found they were willing to go to great lengths to achieve their desires, even if it meant executing a twisted plan. In March 2001, taking advantage of Robert's trust, the lovers convinced him to change his life insurance policy. With James as his new agent, Robert signed an $800,000 policy naming Brenda as the sole beneficiary. Not long after, during that summer, rumors began to spread, as it became increasingly difficult to ignore the amount of time James and Brenda were spending together. Within weeks, the Baptist church prohibited them from continuing to teach Sunday school. However, instead of becoming more discreet, they began to organize outings that included Brenda's children. Devastated by his wife's obvious infidelity and the betrayal of his friend, Robert tried to persuade Brenda to end the affair. But any attempt he made to salvage what was left of their love was met with complaints from her, who began criticizing him, especially for what she saw as his poor performance as a father. As a result, life at the Andrew household grew increasingly bitter. By September 2001, fully aligned with his lover's goals, James asked his wife for a divorce. Initially, James blamed their separation on her not getting along with his American family, but he later concocted more elaborate reasons, claiming that he was doing it to protect her due to issues related to his former Special Forces work. The divorce was finalized in September 2001. A few days later, as Robert was preparing to drive to fulfill his duties as a pastor and advertiser, he made a disturbing discovery and didn't hesitate to report it. An hour later, while Robert was trying to fix the problem with his car, he received a call from an unknown person informing him that his wife Brenda had just been in a car accident. Before rushing to the hospital, he decided to call and verify the information, quickly realizing it was a prank call. Apparently, the same person who had cut his brake lines wanted him to head to the hospital. Shortly after, Robert decided to remove Brenda as the sole beneficiary of his life insurance policy. He replaced her with one of his brothers, someone he trusted completely and knew would never do anything to harm his nieces and nephews. Convinced that the marriage was beyond repair, the marketing expert packed what he needed and left the family home. Meanwhile, significant events were unfolding. First, James purchased a gun from a local store. The second act was a fraudulent scheme orchestrated by the lovers. How they discovered the change in the insurance policy's beneficiary remains unclear, but once they learned of the new beneficiary, Brenda and James didn't back down. Instead, they created a new policy with a forged signature from Robert. On October 3, 2001, Brenda filed for divorce. Her bitterness during that time was so intense that she didn't hesitate to tell anyone who would listen how much she hated her still husband. In stark contrast, it seemed that the situation was causing the Baptist pastor Robert immense pain. This was evident during a conversation he had around that time with his mother-in-law. Robert tried to explain to her that he worked long hours, often spending extended periods away from home, to be the reliable provider he had promised Brenda he would be. Brenda, who enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle without limitations, accused him of being an absent father who was not available for his children. This was the state of their relationship by the end of October 2001. In early November of that year, a couple who lived next door to the Andrews decided to go on a short trip. Before leaving, they handed Brenda the key to their home for safekeeping. Unknowingly, the neighbors provided the lovers with the final piece they needed to complete what they believed to be the perfect plan. With the countdown underway, Brenda was a bundle of rage and anxiety. This was clearly demonstrated during a phone call she made late on the night of Monday, November 19, 2001, to the mother of one of her daughter's friends. Brenda couldn't stop talking about the disdain she felt for Robert, and the malice in her voice and words left her friend feeling a deep sense of unease. The next morning, Tuesday, November 20th, 2001, with every move meticulously planned, James asked his daughter if he could borrow her car, claiming he needed to take it to the shop for some adjustments. That afternoon, Robert drove to the family home to pick up his two children and take them to spend Thanksgiving at his parents' house. On the way, he called his friend Ronnie, as he didn't plan to stay long. He parked next to the garage. At that moment, Brenda asked him to help move a piece of furniture. Suddenly, James appeared from the shadows. While Robert, defenseless and with his hands occupied, was moving the furniture, the ex-military man swiftly pulled the trigger. The bullet struck Brenda's husband. Then, as later revealed by forensic investigation, it was Brenda who took the gun and delivered the second and fatal shot to her husband's chest. It is believed that Robert saw his attacker, but the shots were fatal enough to bring him down completely. The gunshots shattered the stillness of the neighborhood, but Brenda and James, undeterred, continued with their plan. Brenda, using a second firearm, shot herself in the arm. Immediately afterward, James slipped away to hide in the neighboring house. Meanwhile, Brenda called emergency services, her voice filled with feigned anguish, claiming that she and her husband had been attacked by masked intruders. Inside the neighbor's home, the darkness and his nerves betrayed James, causing him to break a shelf in the closet of the master bedroom. He took the broken pieces to the attic, where he disposed of them along with the remaining ammunition. The police, already alerted by Brenda's 911 call, quickly arrived at the scene. They found Robert lying on the floor with bullet wounds in his torso and near his neck. At 43 years old, he was pronounced dead at the scene. Their two children, who had remained safely in their upstairs rooms, were later taken to their grandparents. Brenda, with her arm stained red and fighting against the pain, repeated the same story to the officers that she had told the 911 operator before being taken to the nearest hospital. However, as the investigation began, it became clear that nothing was missing from the house, nor were there any clues pointing to masked gunmen. The first challenge for the investigators was the lack of a clear motive for the crime. At dawn on Wednesday, November 21st, believing the coast was clear, James left his hiding spot and went straight to return the car to his daughter. He barely spoke to her and quickly said goodbye. However, she was shocked to find that her father left a bullet on the car's floor. As the investigation continued without any major breakthroughs, the neighbors returned from their vacation. They thought they had narrowly escaped the nightmare that their neighbors had endured. However, soon after, a discovery put them on high alert. A bullet found in their home, a new piece of evidence, was immediately sent to the forensic lab. The specialist in charge determined without a doubt that it was identical to the one found in Robert's garage. With the neighbors' permission to search their entire home, the officers found several bullets of the same caliber in the attic matching the second gun used in the crime. Since there was no sign of forced entry, the investigators were left with two possibilities. Either the intruder was a professional or it was someone who had a key to the house. With no solid leads, the investigators posed a crucial question: who stood to benefit from Robert's death? As they spoke with those close to him, someone suggested that Brenda was the primary beneficiary of such a tragedy. From there, the authorities learned of the troubles in the couple's relationship and began asking more pointed questions of the family. Meanwhile, James was determined to escape unscathed. He researched Argentina online, having heard that the country had no extradition agreement with the United States. He even asked his daughter to help him create a document with Robert's forged signature, granting permission for him and Brenda to take the children out of the country. His final instruction to her was to transfer funds from his account to hers, so that when he and Brenda left, she could send them money without the transactions being traced back to her account. As the investigation progressed, the police sought the expertise of a handwriting analyst who was tasked with determining the authenticity of Robert's supposed signature on the insurance policy. After hours of detailed analysis and comparisons, he was certain that the signature was forged, although he had no way of identifying who was behind the falsification. The situation took a darker turn on November 25, 2001. That day, James borrowed his ex-wife's car and used it to disappear from Oklahoma with Brenda and her two children. As the couple fled toward Mexico, the next day, Thursday, November 26, 2001, Robert's loved ones were shocked to discover that Brenda had not even attended the funeral service to honor her husband's memory. She had also prevented her children from saying a final goodbye to their father. At that point, investigators had more than enough reasons to consider the couple as the prime suspects in the murder, and their efforts focused on uncovering the truth. However, the fugitives had a significant head start as they were already on Mexican soil. From there, James repeatedly contacted his daughter, asking her to send them money. In the weeks that followed, the investigation progressed slowly but steadily. The authorities eventually found the receipt for a firearm purchase in James's name and later confirmed that he had been the one who forged Robert's signature on the insurance policy. With these discoveries, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Forensic investigations, including ballistics and bloodstain analysis, helped complete the picture of a story driven by jealousy, betrayal, and greed. With a clearer understanding of the situation, law enforcement launched a coordinated operation with various agencies to track down the fugitive suspects. A crucial ally in this effort turned out to be James's daughter, who, after being approached by the police, cooperated with the FBI. Thanks to the detailed information she provided on February 28, 2002, after 3 months on the run, James and Brenda were arrested. Brenda immediately called Rick, her former lover, asking him to help her contact her attorney, claiming she had important legal documents in the children's luggage. One of these documents was a written confession in the form of a letter addressed to her daughter, which prosecutors later stated was actually authored by James, whose handwriting had become familiar to them through the numerous analyses conducted during the investigation. Both James and Brenda were charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. A month later, they were extradited to Oklahoma City, where they were to be tried separately. While in pre-trial detention, Brenda became acquainted with Teresa Sullivan, a federal inmate. Whether it was a slip of the tongue or pride in her actions is unclear, but Brenda confessed to Teresa in great detail everything that had happened on that fateful night in November. Around the same time, a legal battle ensued over the custody of Brenda and Robert's children. A judge initially placed them in the care of their paternal grandparents, but Brenda was unhappy with this arrangement. She wanted them to live with her sister, claiming that she didn't trust her in-laws and feared they would prevent the children from visiting her in prison. A neutral attorney, appointed solely to represent the children's interests, reported that the kids exhibited unusual behavior after visiting their mother in jail. As a result, the attorney recommended against further visits. The judge overseeing the case spent an entire day listening to witnesses and lawyers. The judge then announced his decision that the kids would remain with the Andrews family. He noted that the longer the children stayed in that home, the more they seemed to thrive. The case against James and Brenda involved months of waiting, including witness selection, jury deliberations, evidence gathering, and other necessary steps. Finally, on August 25, 2003, James went to trial. After all the evidence and testimonies were presented, implicating him as the planner and one of the perpetrators of the crime, he was found guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder a month later. As a result, in October of that same year, James was sentenced to death. Brenda's trial took place in 2004, and during the grueling sessions, 2 specific testimonies caused a significant stir, both for the defendant and the public. The individuals who took the stand were none other than Rick and James, her former lovers, who both described her as a seductive and manipulative woman. But just when it seemed the trial had exhausted all possibilities for controversy or shock, the prosecutor, during his closing argument, presented a piece of Brenda's lingerie to the jury, arguing that the item was compelling evidence that the supposedly grieving widow had packed it to flee with her lover. According to a local newspaper, the spectacle caused gasps in the packed courtroom. On September 22, 2004, after 6 weeks of trial, Brenda was found guilty of all charges against her. The Oklahoma County jury also voted in favor of the death penalty. The following day, during her sentencing hearing, Brenda arrived with a defiant attitude, looking directly at the judge and condemning both the verdict and the sentence as egregious judicial errors. She vowed to fight until her name was cleared. Finally, as stipulated, the judge sentenced Brenda to death for the murder of her husband, Robert Andrew. Both Brenda and her former lover were placed on death row in Oklahoma, with Brenda being the only woman in that position in the entire state. But as she had predicted, she focused on efforts to overturn what she considered an injustice. However, Brenda's first major setback came on June 21, 2007, when the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals denied her appeal by a vote of 4-1. The following year, the U.S. Supreme Court rejected her appeal as well. On February 26, 2024, the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights issued a resolution granting precautionary measures in favor of Brenda, considering her to be in a situation of serious and urgent risk of irreparable harm to her rights. After 18 years on death row, the commission argued that Brenda faced imminent execution, likely in 2024, which would violate several provisions of the American Declaration of the Rights and Duties of Man. These included the right to due process, equality before the law, a fair trial, and adequate defense. The petitioners specifically claimed that her trial was laden with gender stereotypes and a discriminatory narrative. For its part, the state informed the petitioners that it had forwarded the request for precautionary measures to the Oklahoma Attorney General and reiterated its position that the commission lacks the authority to require states to adopt such measures. As for James, he exhausted his appeals in the case and is now the 26th inmate eligible for an execution date once Oklahoma resumes carrying out such sentences. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.